Hello. I would like to talk about research proposals today. And but before we get there, and I will show you a sample research proposal, I want to talk about the music research process. So here we have this little scheme. Uh, we have to come up with some idea. We usually have some idea, something we are interested in. But very often that idea is much too broad. So, for example, we are interested in a particular composer. Maybe we play an instrument and we are interested in that particular instrument, the music composed by a particular composer. But probably that is much too broad because the composer may have composed dozens of pieces for this instrument. And if we are just writing a paper, a 25-page paper, let's say, then that to write about this particular instrument um, with the music composed by this composer is much too broad. So we have to spend considerable amount of time narrowing this idea. But in fact, the further we go down this process, um, especially on number two, when we actually search for existing research, we will realize that our idea is too broad, and we have to go back and then narrow it. So we on every uh, step of this process, we can always go back and revise previous steps. So number two is collecting previous research on that topic. So that is secondary literature. We want to search in databases such as ARILM, Music Index, and Music Periodicals database, and then some more general databases such as JSTOR and Project Muse. We want to search for literature on our idea. In that search, we'll have to play with keywords that are related to our topic. We may have to take synonyms and so on. So there will be separate videos on searching in those databases. But we search for existing literature. And if we find a lot of literature that directly relates to our idea, then we have to think about, well, isn't there already too much done on this topic? Or what is my original contribution to this topic? So when we talk about music research at this level, we want to produce music research that is original. That means that nobody else has done before, or at least some aspects of it. Of course, there can be some parts of the paper that is something that is known, information that is known, maybe biographic or background information, but other aspects of the paper that nobody has done before, maybe on a piece of music that nobody has published about, or looking at a piece of music from a different angle. Let's say I play the violin and I would like to and I played, let's say, the second violin in the orchestra, and I want to analyze all the second violin parts in a certain genre or one particular piece of music. Right, so we can choose a different angle. So we have to keep in mind that we want to do something, at least some parts of our paper that nobody else has done before. So once we have looked at research, and I don't just mean looking at, I mean starting to assemble a bibliography. So when we find items that directly relate to our idea, we include it in our bibliography. If we later to decide to drop it, then we can delete it, but we need to build a bibliography. So once we have sufficiently narrowed the idea and found interesting research related to it, we need to think about the research methods. There are a number of different research methods. In fact, I will here in my course pack. I will skip ahead. I'd like to use this example from this very old book, but although things have changed and we have a lot of digital methods, the general categories of these methods are still very usable. So this is from Ruth Watanabe, Introduction to Music Research. So she distinguishes 10 different methods. First, the historical, in which chronological account of the subject is given. Then the developmental, the theoretical, so that could be music analytical, right? Focusing on certain elements of music, such as melody, harmony, form, and so on. This is analytical. It's related to number 3 in certain ways. So analytical, in which the subject is taken apart and reconstructed to learn why and how it functions. So now if it is related to the music itself, then it's very close to number 3, but it can be also on a historical topic. The analytical can be a little bit different, taking apart historical developments or cultural aspects and so on. Anyways, comparative. So we may compare pieces, for example, or historical time periods, or composers, right? Experimental. We test something in the hopes of discovering a physical or a psychological phenomenon. The critical, in which some criteria. Oh, so let me give you an example of the experimental. For example, if we play music to other people and ask them about it, or observe their reactions, that would be an experiment. Or a lot of research on teaching methods may be experimental, right? Anyways, the critical method, in which some criteria of judgment are established and applied to an evaluation of the subject. Statistical methods, in which results of analyses or surveys or answers to questionnaires are tabulated to reach some conclusion or to prove or disprove a theory. Survey research is always interesting because it's almost always original, even if we use questions that have been asked before. But we might ask the same questions to different people, or in a different context of it. But one really needs to study then the design of surveys if we wanted to pursue this, and we also have to consider laws and regulations on human subject research, and there will be a separate video on that. Then the speculative method, in which a philosophy or theory may be formulated, and the descriptive method, in which a subject or a condition is systematically and fully described. There are some other types or some other subtypes, but at least we get some general idea. And for music history courses, students have to write a history course, so method will rather be historical, although there could also be analysis in there, so it could be analytical or theoretical. So it could be a combination of several methods. The best is to actually ask questions about what research questions should the paper answer, and then we can ask, well, how do we answer those research questions, and that is the method. Anyways, then we collect the data. So if we analyze a piece of music, the data is analytical data. If we write a historical paper about a composer or time period, then the data is of historical nature. We analyze the data. We look at the data critically, and we draw conclusions from it. And then we formulate results. We evaluate the data. We actually write out the results, and then okay, it says publication here. It could as well mean turning in the paper to the professor if the paper is for a class. But if it's outside of a class, it may just as well be a publication or a presentation at a conference. And there will be a separate video on how to prepare and apply for a conference. Anyways, so this is the research process. It's very important to keep in mind. So I would like you to write a research proposal, and the research proposal has to cover these things. So first of all, think about a research idea, a topic. Most often the topic is too broad, try to limit its focus. Second, find and start reading literature on your topic. Also, take notes, perhaps. Create a bibliography, or start creating a bibliography. Take notes on the literature. So and then we want to write a paper proposal, and that proposal, or also called abstract, the word proposal is really better in this context because we propose the paper. Abstract is more something we have already done, but those words are used interchangeably depending on who uses it and how the words are being used. Anyways, you have to have a title for your research, at least to propose a title. It should be concise, but it should also be explicit as possible. If you're not sure, write a longer title or a main title, colon, and subtitle, but something that reflects explicitly as possible on what the paper will be about. Then you write on what kind of research has and has not been done. Of course, that is based on the search for secondary literature. So you actually have to pursue some searches here. Then include very brief discussions on existing scholarly sources in the proposal, in the actual abstract. Then you need to say how your proposal, how your proposed research fits into existing research. So other scholars have done this and that, but I am focusing on this, and that is my original contribution. So this is how you can point out your original contribution. So what research questions do you want to answer? You can say directly, this paper will answer or will strive to answer the following questions. And then you have a series of questions. And then in your abstract, you say, okay, what primary or secondary sources will you use? So what kind of sources will you use? What are your research methods? How will you answer your research questions? So the how is the research methods, right? Then these can possibly be exchanged, so the bibliography can come first and then the timeline, or the other way around, but you want to have a timeline of your research on when to complete what, and that is best done into detail. So anyways, and that can be revised later once you have a more detailed structure of the paper here under point 4. Anyways, and in initial bibliography, I usually say, well, at least 5 items or so. So at least this is something I would like you to do now. That's why it's highlighted green. Later on, after revisions, so after receiving feedback on the initial proposal, revise the proposal, also work out the detailed paper structure with chapter titles and subheaders. It's best to go into details into the structure, subheaders and sub-subheaders, because it will make it much easier to write the paper, because you can chunk down the process of writing if you know if you know the structure, the detailed structure of the paper. So let's say you know what content goes into one particular paragraph. That paragraph might be very easy to write, but if your task is to write a 5-page chapter of an entire paper, it's very difficult to even start. So go into as detailed as possible in the paper structure with brief content descriptions for each chapter, subchapter, sub-subchapter, plus a more detailed bibliography. So not for this particular course, but for other things, you would actually write the paper and revise your timeline as you go on. You proofread your paper, you let others read your paper to receive feedback, and then you turn in the final research paper. I want to finally give you an example. This is what one of the students recently actually wrote a paper on, the Hays Code Hollywood, how oppression in film led to a lack of recognition of Black musicians. So this is the actual proposal. It's just one long paragraph, so just one page, double-spaced, not very long. So it reads like, limited amounts of research can be found on the Hays Code and its relationship with race. However, I plan to address two related questions that are widely uncovered. How were other forms of popular culture affected by the code, and in what way was the recognition of Black artists manipulated by the heavily restrictive and racist policies of the Hays Code? So the first sentence point out there is some limited research. In fact, it might be even best in parentheses here to mention the author and the date it was published, for example, and so have some references in the actual proposal, author date references, because it makes it look more scholarly. It makes it more scholarly because you can show to the reader of your proposal that you are actually aware of some publications, and that should relate directly to the bibliography or to the beginning bibliography. There are only 3 items in this bibliography. 5 might be better, but anyways. So there's some limited research done on this, but I want to do this and answer 2 questions. So these are the research questions. And then it says, this unique topic, unique points out the originality. This unique topic demands further research and attention. I can input a new and innovative perspective on the impact of the Hays Code by including information about musicians. I will be able to utilize the existing research on race relations and the representation of minorities in Hollywood during this period and expand into the under recognition of minority musicians. You may also possibly, if you refer to a period, you may want to point out which time period you're talking about, so you can actually include years maybe in parentheses. So all of these popular mediums are intrinsically linked. The regulations and standards of one pop culture agency affected not only the public's perception, but other facets of the entertainment industry as well. I want to answer the questions, to what degree did the Hays Code affect the public's perception of African Americans, and as a result, what effect did that have on the recognition of Black artists in other popular mediums like music? I'm planning to use mostly academic journals and historical information in order to answer my questions. So these are the sources. I anticipate that I will realize that the film music, so maybe one shortcoming of this particular proposal is it doesn't explicitly say what research method, but it's implied here that it is a historical research method. and then the next sentence is about what one anticipates to find. It's always good to have some kind of anticipation, even if you find something entirely different. But it would be good to think about what might I find, right? And then I anticipate that I will realize that the music and film industries are in fact linked, and that the Hays Code stifled the recognition and acceptance of black musicians within both the music industry and the greater public. Specifically, this essay or this paper is intended for anyone interested in the history of entertainment, music, and race relations within the United States, but it is my hope that nearly anyone can read it due to the subject matter which has affected pop culture for the past century. So, this is actually about the target audience. It is always good to think about who is the target audience of this kind of research. So, then you list your basic bibliography, and you have maybe a proposed timeline, right? So this is just a sample one from the spring semester. It's a very nice timeline, very nice proposal. So I would like you to write a proposal just like that on a topic that is of interest to you. Just a proposal, just 1 or 2 paragraphs with a brief bibliography and a brief timeline that you would do if you would actually write the paper, although you're not writing it for the purpose of this course. So anyways, enjoy doing your research.